Hey gang, welcome back to another video and part 2 of the BDX Droid build. There's still a ton of painting and assembly left to do, so let's jump right into it. With most of the frame assembled in the previous video, I can get to prepping all of the parts sent to me from JLC 3DP. These resin printed parts didn't really need any sanding, so I jumped right into priming them with some basic gray primer. I was reminded in the previous video that filler primer can make assembly a bit more challenging than it needs to be, so a standard primer is the way to go. Plus the fine texture on these parts gave them a machined look, which I thought went well for a droid like this. With the larger pieces out of the way, I could shift to the smaller greeblies, including the ears, eyes, face, and chest details. And when they were done, I could move on to top coating the lower legs. These will eventually get aged with a bit of silver paint or possibly some rub and buff, much like the knobs from my recent Ecto Goggles prop. So I'll be painting them matte black and then setting them aside to dry. Now that the primer had fully dried, I can get to painting all of the body panels in Stardust White. Fun fact, almost all of the colors I picked for this build have some kind of Star Wars tie-in. It wasn't something I'd planned, it was just a happy accident that I leaned into. Some of the resin printed pieces will get an oxidized metallic paint job, so they'll get painted in a satin medium gray spray paint, and then a few moments later we'll get a dusting of metallic spray paint. This use of a lighter base color will make these parts brighter than the dummy motor pieces I used this method on in the previous video. Next on my to-do list is to add a bit of color. I decided that my droid was going to be orange, because why not work in a little bit of Halloween into your Star Wars? So I grabbed this lava orange spray paint and got down to it, starting with these feet covers. These ankle motor cover plates also get an orange accent around the outside edge, so I masked off the centers with some painter's tape and trimmed off any excess with a razor blade, and then they got painted. And since I had the orange spray paint in hand, I could paint these lower leg covers too. At this point, the only things that hadn't been assembled or painted are the neck and the base of the head. But before I could join them all together, I needed to drill out some of the mounting holes to fit the hardware I had on hand. And since these will all be the same color, I figured I'd do a bit of assembly and paint it all at the same time. While I wait for that to dry, I can move on to the feet and lower legs. This cover piece gets screwed to the interior foot with a few socket head screws. Then I can grab the lower leg and set the dummy motor ring in place with a few more screws. Once it's tightened up, I can slot the foot into it, and the lower leg assembly is complete. Once both legs were done and my paint was dry, I could grab the ankle cover plates and mount them in position. With the lower legs finished, I can shift my attention to the upper legs. The bulk of this assembly was covered in the first video, but now that I have my panels painted, I can install them, plus the cable guide greeblies, and piece by piece I'm getting a feel for what my BDX droid is going to look like. The final bit on the legs is the addition of this geared motor piece. This will get mounted to the top with a few screws and will give me the ability to lock in the angle of the knees. And once it's installed, I can test fit the upper and lower leg sections together and then temporarily mount them to a similar piece that's acting as the hip joint within the frame. At this point, I'm really starting to see the finish line, so I kicked into high gear and got to mounting the head and body panels. The last bit before I wrap this droid up is the addition of a few pieces of split wire loom. If this were motorized, these would carry all of the cabling, but since this will be static, they're just here for looks. And with everything in place and tightened down, this BDX droid is done. For now.
Now there's still a ton of painting, graphics, and weathering to be done, but I think this is a good stopping point. If you want to see me tackle those finishing touches, leave a comment down below and maybe I'll revisit it in a future video. I'd like to thank this video's sponsor JLC 3DP for sending me the resin printed pieces, and be sure to check out their website for more information. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.